Welcome back to the Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Going to spend some time with Lee Kaplan. He's a regular contributor on the Price of Business and does a great job talking about what's happening in the business front, bringing us really important information and keeping us informed. He's got a great background in business law with his law firm, Smyser, Kaplan and Veselka. That's skv.com, and excellent insight on what's happening in the business front. And Lee, welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
Great. Good morning.
Recently, you were in San Francisco. I'm assuming that was probably a combination of business and pleasure, or was that all pleasure?
That's right. It was business.
Well, do you mind kind of giving us some insight? Because you were right there in a city where a lot of talk is, particularly in the technology front. Any interesting stories that you picked up on while you were there?
Well, there were a few things. I mean, one thing I find fascinating is that one of the issues roiling San Francisco is that there are a number of people who work for Silicon Valley companies such as Google, and Google actually arranges to give them free transport to Mountain View, where Google has its offices. And the people in San Francisco are upset that there are Google employees living in San Francisco and, quote-unquote, driving up housing prices. I mean, these people ought to be on their knees that they've got people working for Google spending money in San Francisco, paying sales taxes, and generally helping the economic health of the city, and instead they're angry because their housing prices are going up. It's just crazy. So, it just, you never know how people will react to things, and in a time when everybody tries to attract young, intelligent people into the inner city, we have a city where they're angry about their existence there. It's just astounding, frankly. So I thought that was the most amusing thing about my visit.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. It's incredible especially a lot of these Silicon Valley companies where it's not unusual to have CEOs in their 30s and even late 20s because of striking it rich thanks to technology and that type of thing. But often they have the most laudable of motives, but they sure change with money, don't they?
Well, let me tell you, I wish Houston had more of those people. And if they want to have their offices in Katy and live in Houston, more power to them. That's the kind of thing we should always want. And candidly, that led me to the topic that I was going to mention today, and that's immigration. I just find it astounding that we cannot pass some sort of a bill that allows more people to come to the United States, particularly young people with skills. The Chamber of Commerce is all over this, but I'm surprised that every small business owner isn't looking forward to ways in which he or she can hire more people who, among other things, are young, really want to work because they want to support their families, and in many cases are bilingual, whether it's speaking Spanish or Chinese. It's astounding to me that the Republican Party in particular isn't championing immigration reform, and it's also kind of amusing to me that the Democrats, who for years had unions that resisted a more open immigration policy, are now the champions of immigration reform. So there's been a reversal, and to my mind, this ought to be a bipartisan issue. It just doesn't make sense that we do not have a more orderly process for giving people a path to citizenship.
Yeah, I think that, I think the Democrats actually believe that if they have the type of immigration policy that it appears they're pursuing, they won't need the unions anymore. I mean, they'll just have a massive majority just based on the demographics because of really the types of people they're trying to bring in. It isn't even the people you're talking about. I think a lot of Republicans would concur. There's a dearth in talent in the intellectual areas and in the high skilled areas in this country that immigrants, legal immigrants, could easily fulfill and are needed to fulfill. So we've got this chaotic environment. The laws we have aren't being enforced, You've got a laissez-faire attitude about immigration, about people that I don't think bring a whole lot to the economic, basket. May create a basket case, but not add to our basket of goods. And so it's making Republicans reactionary, and I think Democrats myopic in terms of what it will do long-term wise. I think there is a case for a third way.
A lot of this started around the time of 9/11. I mean, it had its genesis before then when Pete Wilson of California suddenly became anti-immigrant, and that was a large part of what he was talking about when he was trying to run for president a long time ago. But 9/11 increased this, and the real issue that 9/11 created is that student visas and visas for technical workers became much more difficult to obtain. And, one of the things the United States has specialized in is educating people from overseas and then having them stay here because they like it so much. Now, we're making it harder for them to study here, so they study elsewhere. And, of course, then we don't acquire their talents because they never come here at all. Or we make them feel unwelcome. And that's frankly, crazy, non-economic behavior.
No question about it. No question about it. Lee Kaplan is our guest. Meisner, Kaplan, and Veselka. It's his firm, and that's skb.com. And very interesting. Yeah, I think there's a case to be made for a third way. I think what we're seeing is kind of bizarre extremism on both sides, in my opinion.
Well, what's interesting is Governor Perry once upon a time said, if you build a 16-foot fence, there's going to be a market for 17-foot ladders. And at one point, he, I think, recognized that you can't simply seal the border. And now Governor Perry is spending a lot of time talking about bringing the guard down to the border and some things like that. And that's really unfortunate. I can't blame one party or the other, but it does seem that we need some adult supervision on this issue and for people to stop demagoguing it and really talk about the economic health of the country. And if you're in Houston, we need people who are Spanish-speaking, and we need people who speak Asian languages because we still want to trade with them. Even though our ships, for example, go through the Panama Canal, we need that kind of talent. And very few Americans are truly bilingual. So we need these immigrants in Houston, in this area. And the immigration laws make that very difficult. And it's unfortunate.
No question about it. No question about it. Give us, by the way, I'm curious as to closer to home here in Houston in particular, anything else that you've been seeing that you want to bring to our attention?
Well, the thing that comes to my mind the most is, and I've seen this in both large cases I've been involved with and smaller cases, is the importance of very straightforward, lucid written agreements in contracts. I'm involved in some matters in which contracts are extremely long, for example, construction contracts, and there's litigation because people claim there's a bust between 2 or 3 clauses, and there are some legitimate arguments to be made there. More frequently, it's the other way around, that there is a contract or purchase order entered into. The conduct and course of dealing of the parties varies from that, and then they have an argument at some point as to whether the written contract or purchase order that they started with controls, or the course of dealing that they've adopted over the last 2 years or 3 years or whatever. And then you end up in front of a jury, and that's unfortunate. I think if you're going to have a course of dealing that varies from a written contract, at the very least, there ought to be an exchange of emails that reflects that. And if, for example, you're a subcontractor or a contractor to an owner, and an owner has a process for approving your invoices, and then the owner says, oh, please keep working, we've had a backup on this, we can't do this and that, then you need to get something, at least by an electronic communication, verifying that they've asked you to continue working, you're doing it at their request, even though the work you're doing is something that's not part of the original purchase order, not part of the original contract, or not yet approved, but officially under the way the contract calls for it, but they've asked you to do this work, because that's what makes for litigation. And frankly, the country would be better off if the lawyers had less work to do.
Very, very good. Makes perfect sense. And, you should do that all on the front end. It's funny how, people will prepare for disasters in other scenarios, even in divorce, but they don't do it in the problem that can happen in a business relationship.
That's right. And, candidly, lawyers are very expensive. They are the most expensive lubrication that there is in the wheels of commerce, and you ought to do everything you can to avoid that need, if you can, because clear agreements, particularly when circumstances change, are very important. So if I were to give people business advice about how to use my services less frequently, I'd say don't do it based on a telephone call or a conversation. Make sure you've got something documented, because otherwise the jury will just hear two people getting on the stand and saying, this is what he said, and the other person saying, no, I didn't. It's easier when you have something tangible to point to. This was our deal.
Yep, absolutely. Lee Kaplan is his name. As you know, we have him on often to help us navigate through a lot of these business and legal issues that are out there. He always does a great job. His website, skv.com. They are experts, and particularly in the business litigation front. But as you hear clearly, it always makes sense to try to prevent that on the front end. Great insight. Thanks so much, Lee.
You're welcome. We'll talk again soon.
I'm sorry?
We'll talk again soon.
We certainly will. When we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here shows up over there at usdatareview.com. I am Kevin Price. You're listening to The Price of Business.